Both of us have gone through the parental moving.
Yes.
Moving from a house into independent living for both of our cases. And wasn't easy. A, we had to convince the parents. B, we had to figure out what to do with the stuff.
Right. And it's a big change when you're switching from a house to an apartment and just a different lifestyle. So there's lots of things, though, that when you're planning for that move and helping your parent with that move that we can do to really make it a little bit easier. Today, we have Leah Harlig, and her company is Essential Next Steps, and they are a move manager. I love that.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being with us. And as Mike mentioned, we've both done this with our parents, moving from a house to an independent living. Fortunately, in my case, my mom had decided that this was something she wanted to do. And so it was a little bit easier, but it's still stressful when you're moving and having to make all those adjustments. So I imagine that a lot of what you do too is kind of taking care of the details so that it doesn't feel as stressful for them.
That is a big component of our job, to make it as easy and stress-free as possible for the client, for the family, and for the community where the client's moving.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there's so much stress involved if the parents aren't ready to really make that move. And in our case, both of us, we kind of had to force the issue to a certain extent, not too much.
Just kept talking
just
about
a little
it.
bit.
We just kept having a conversation.
And the best thing is, both sides finally bought in and they love where they are now. So it helps a lot. But it's something that you need to plan ahead of time and start that conversation rolling.
Exactly. The earlier you start the conversation, the better, so that you're not hit cold with something huge. So.
Mm-hmm. And I would imagine the earlier that they can kind of decide what kind of place would you want to live,
exactly.
What kind of amenities do you need? Things like that are going to make it easier. But then once they've decided is when somebody like you comes in, or in our case, it was me for the most part. I would have my mom put sticky notes on the things that, okay, what are the things you really want to keep? And we would put sticky notes on them so that we could try to figure out if they would fit. But I imagine a lot of what you do is figuring out how do you take what they had in a house and put it in an apartment. What advice do you have?
Exactly. So our advice is like, what are the pieces that are most essential so we can actually create home for you in your new environment? And so typically we'll meet with the client, see what it is they're wanting to move, and then we'll actually create a floor plan for them to make sure that it works in the new space. Mm-hmm. And when we're wanting something to work in the new space, not only must it be beautiful, but it needs to be functional. So we need to make sure there are clear pathways, especially if a parent is walking with an assistive device. Mm-hmm. So clear pathways, plenty of space, and then once the floor plans are approved, then we'll start to roll forward, so that everybody knows what to expect. Client has a good idea of what the new space will be like.
Well, one of the things that we quickly realized with my mom was that most of her furniture wouldn't fit because you can't. She was going from a big, large, oversized leather couch. There wasn't room. So, at least for my mom, it was kind of an opportunity for her, it was a little bit of a treat to be able to, get a few new pieces of furniture and kind of make it, I think it made it more exciting to be able to move into something, a new place with new stuff.
Absolutely.
And that's not an option, but certainly.
Absolutely. Furniture in a house is designed for the parameters of the house, and most senior communities, the apartments are smaller and they're not designed to hold full-size furniture. Mm-hmm. So a couch becomes replaced with a love seat, or oftentimes, usually a couple of recliners can take place for a couch also.
So I think one thing. I guess kind of the first thing is really assessing their current furniture and or decorations, if you will.
Yes.
Is there a mirror, or there were a few pieces of my mom's that had a lot of sentimental value, a chair of her granddad's, things like that we wanted to make sure we kept, but having to be aware that as you're looking, not everything may fit. Yeah. And your parents kind of found the same thing a little bit too.
Yeah. So I was lucky enough. My parents moved into an independent living place about 5 years ago, and they spent 4 years basically living in the independent living place, but still had the house. And my sister and I convinced them last year, we really need to get rid of the house. We need to sell the house because it's costing you too much and taking too much of your time to try to keep up with it. So for 4 years, they gradually brought some stuff from the house to the independent living place. And then last year we had to figure out what to do with everything. And we had an estate sale. We gave stuff to relatives. different, you know, we all took some stuff as well, but a lot of people don't have that luxury. And when you're under the gun, so to speak, it's like, oh my gosh, we have to do it now. It adds a lot more stress to the situation, doesn't it?
It does. And things can happen quickly if need be. If you don't have the luxury of being able to keep your current home as you move into into your new place, we work with estate sale providers to help clear it out. Consignment is always an option, and donations are always an option, and a good move manager will direct you in either in all of those areas to help you. There's also disposal services, and there's a couple of disposal services that, well, there's one in particular that we use that their goal is that nothing goes to landfill. So they have relationships with nonprofits in Austin. So most of what they pick up gets donated. And I've also found that if somebody knows that their things will be used and appreciated, it's easier to get rid of them. Whether to family or to stranger, it makes a difference. Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and something that you had shared with me before we did the interview was the fact that about one example of people giving it to friends, which I thought was kind of an interesting idea.
Yeah, we met a wonderful couple when we first moved to Dripping Springs. My dad was in a nursing home. That's kind of how the genesis of our business. And this wonderful couple, they were in New Mexico, and they knew that when they were coming here that this would be their last stop, and it was a much smaller space than what they had. And so they invited their friends, and they started with their best friends first to come to their home and pick out what they wanted. And I think they had 2 or 3 waves of friends come and do that, and then they actually got to enjoy their friends enjoying their things before they left, and they loved that.
Yeah.
And I had another client, and when she turned 85, her joints had swollen in her hands, and so she invited all of the women in her family, her daughters and nieces, and gave away her jewelry. And and it thrilled her. I mean, she lit up like a Christmas tree when she was telling the story. It thrilled her to be able to see them enjoy it right now. So I share these stories because there are ways to part with things that's not so traumatic. It actually brings great joy to the giver and the receiver.
Yeah. Great way to think about it, because I think that it's not just like, hey, mom and dad, you got to get rid of all this stuff, or especially if it's stuff that things that maybe the family doesn't have a use for or doesn't have a place for. It's not, because so many times we dealt with this, that it wasn't worth putting it just in storage to sit for years, because then you're just paying for storage units. And so I guess, what would be your thoughts as far as like, when people are ready to move, there's, obviously there's the things you have to think about as far as like, what are you moving from one place to another, and what other things can we do to try to help make it as stress-less as possible for our stress-free, right? Less stressful, because it may still have some stress, but some stress. Yeah, but I love the idea of giving some of your things away, donating them, all of that. Any other things that we can do to help it be less stressful for our parents?
I think that where a move manager serves is a good communication with the client and good communication with the community where the client's moving. So that is a task that can be taken off the client's list, and creating a plan together with the client so that there really is team in moving the move forward, and then just knowing that with a move manager, we take care of the packing, we take care of the moving, we take care of the unpacking. So you're not living in boxes, you're not living in packing material. And when you come in, your home is set up and it's ready for you. And that's hard for most people to imagine. And I know that because of the reaction I get every time it happens. And it's really a beautiful thing to see, that it actually can happen the way that it should.
Right.
So
right. I kind of had this vision of extreme home makeovers. How people always in the TV show where they'd walk in and they're so surprised. And I bet you probably get some of those same expressions, like, oh, like it's ready.
Yeah, it's home.
It's ready, and it feels like home. Like, even more importantly, it feels like it's amazing. You get the artwork up, the family photos up, you get the decor, like it's similar to how they had it at home, and it feels like home.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the goal.
Yeah. You want them to feel, we did that with my mom, where I was sort of in charge of most of the packing and trying to help mom decide. And then my sister-in-law was able to come in, and she has a gift for being able to figure out, oh, that mirror that was in that room actually would work great in this room, so so together we really really kind of tag teamed, and it was amazing that just seeing it in a different place, but it still was her stuff and her memory.
Yeah. Which and you can actually see yourself newly when it's in a new environment. You can see your things newly when it's in a new environment, and that can be fun. We just did that with a client last month, and a piece that had been in her bedroom for 30 years was in the living room. It's like, it's almost like a new piece of art now. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So many great things to think about.
Any way to reduce the stress is great, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you, Leah. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure.
Well, I definitely things to think about, because if in our case, we ended up doing it kind of ourselves, but it's nice to know that there are people like Leah who can really come in and be able to provide that service if you don't have the time to do it yourself.
Yeah, especially if you're not that close to where your parents live, or you don't have the time.
Yes.
Lots of different reasons why. And if you have that extra help, it can reduce the stress tremendously.
And probably even helps with the communication between the family, because sometimes, just like when we're communicating with our children, sometimes bringing in a third person and hearing it from somebody else, they hear it differently, don't they? And
That's
so
right.
I bet our parents do sometimes as well.
That's good. That's good.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, if you ever have any topics you'd like us to talk to an expert about, let us know. We're happy to do it right here on Parenting Aging Parents.